When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Skims or Allbirds, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and great marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling and for shoppers buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. It's home of Shop Pay, the #1 checkout in the world. You can use it to boost conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going through to checkout. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/income.
This is Cindy Burnett. Welcome to my award-winning podcast, Thoughts from a Page, a member of the Evergreen Podcast Network. On this show, I chat with authors whose books I have enjoyed about their new releases and others in the book world about the books they have loved. With so many books coming out weekly, it can be hard to decide what to read, so I find the best ones and share them with you. In a similar vein, I recently released my 17-page 2025 Winter Reading Guide that highlights 45 recent and upcoming releases, plus new titles in book series, fiction, nonfiction pairings, stellar mystery series, and some anticipated spring and summer releases. All of these will make great reads for this winter and spring. I strive to find those under-the-radar gems. If you're interested, fill out the Google form in the show notes and submit a tip of your choosing. Today, Kelly Hooker returns for February's real-time reading. I always enjoy these episodes where Kelly and I can catch up on what we've been reading, what's coming up next, and share all of that with you. So first, we talk about what we read recently, then we go through what we're currently reading, what's up next, and what's come in the mail. I hope you enjoy our conversation.
This episode is brought to you by Nerds Gummy Clusters, the sweet treat that always elevates the vibe. With a sweet gummy surrounded with tangy, crunchy nerds, every bite of Nerds Gummy Clusters brings you a whole new world of flavor. Whether it's game night, on the way to a concert, or kicking back with your crew, unleash your senses with Nerds Gummy Clusters.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. From your morning podcast to your afternoon playlist, State Farm knows you personalize your entire day, and that's why State Farm helps you personalize your insurance with the State Farm Personal Price Plan. It offers coverage options that help protect what you care about most at an affordable price just for you. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Prices vary by state. Options selected by customer. Availability and eligibility may vary.
Welcome, Kelly. How are you today?
I am doing well, Cindy. It's so great to be back talking with you about books.
I agree. I love these real-time reading episodes, and I'm really excited to hear what you've been reading and what's coming up for you.
Yes, usually we're in very close contact about our reading, but you took a trip to Africa, and so we weren't quite as in touch as we normally are. So it will be fun to see what you've been reading and loving and not loving.
Well, and surprisingly, I really thought I would get a lot read on our trip because we had a lot of airplane trips and a lot of downtime, or at least I thought we were going to have a lot of downtime. But I just didn't. I read a few things, but I didn't read a ton. And I read a couple things related to the trip that aren't really worth talking about. I didn't really read nearly as much as I thought I would.
I think you were probably just enjoying the moment, taking it all in.
I think that's probably right. And then we also, as you know, lost our luggage for the first leg of our trip. So I was all stressed out about that for that last leg, like flying into Rwanda when we knew we probably didn't have our luggage and I couldn't really focus. And then, that kind of took a lot of time while we were in Rwanda, trying to figure out what to do with no other clothes. I was just a little distracted, and I think there's just been a lot happening. It's been a little hard to focus on reading.
Yes, I've felt this same way, not because I was traveling internationally, but just after the big push to get my winter reading guide out and reading constantly every spare minute, I've had a hard time diving back into books and feeling like I've had the time or bandwidth to really sit and read. And so I'm just starting to get that back, but that's how it's been the last few weeks.
Yes, and that makes sense. And it's nice to take a break. I think your brain can use it.
I think so too.
So what else is happening there?
Well, we are getting ready to drive to Florida in a few days. And so I'm just getting packed and organized for myself and the boys and planning out my books I want to bring and all of that. So I think it will be a fun trip. My family and in-laws rented a big house on the beach, but it's an 80s palace. It is massive, but it is not super immaculate or updated, but it's got space for all of us and it's right on the beach. And then there's a pool right at the house too. So it's perfect for the boys. We stayed there last year and we are back for the 80s palace again.
Okay, I absolutely love that 80s palace. I love that 30A area. It's so pretty. And to be right on the beach, that's awesome.
Yes, absolutely. So we are gearing up for that. How about you?
Well, other than our trip to Africa, which was fabulous, not much has been happening here. So I'm going to talk a little bit later. I've joined a book club and I'll talk a little bit about that. But other than that, I've just been trying to kind of recuperate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a lot to recover from. A great trip, but it just probably takes a lot out of you just with the travel.
Yes, and just by the time we were done, it was a long trip and we were both pretty worn out.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's a huge trip back. So we flew Nairobi to Frankfurt, which was 9 hours. And then we had over 6 hours in Frankfurt, and then Frankfurt to Dulles, which was another 9 hours, and then a 2-hour drive. So it was just a long trip back. We were like, okay, we're going to make it.
Yeah, I bet that 2-hour drive was just a so close yet so far situation.
You know, I was worried it was going to be like that, and I actually drove that. Michael often does, but I was kind of ready to just be focusing on something after all that time sitting.
Mm-hmm.
And it was nice to be back in the U.S. I mean, we had a fabulous time, but it was really nice. Like, we stopped at Chick-fil-A, got a drink with ice in it, like just, all these things that we had not been doing while we were gone. So really it wasn't that bad. And we just kind of chatted, listened to music. It was nice because we were kind of back in control, driving our own car and on a highway versus like a little 2-lane road with potholes, so it was actually nice.
Okay, well, that's great. I'm so glad you got to take that trip together.
Me too. It was definitely a bucket list trip.
Absolutely. Well, tell me about your last read.
Well, my last read is in a vein with that because I decided on my way home to read The Safari by Jaclyn Goldis, which comes out in May. So Adelia Babel, CEO of a sustainable fashion empire, is about to marry for the second time to a man 25 years her junior. Asher Bach is the 30-something designer of Adelia's luxury clothing line, the darling of every high-fashion journalist and madly in love with Adelia. Eager to celebrate her nuptials with her nearest and dearest, she invites her adult children, her daughter-in-law, her grandchild, and her best friend/assistant to an all-expenses-paid luxury safari at Leopard Sands in South Africa, the Babel family's favorite vacation spot. It seems like the perfect trip, but not everyone is thrilled for the happy couple. Amid game drives in the bush and bonfires beneath the desert stars, tensions among the family threaten to boil over. And then the morning after a big fight with her son Sam, and hours before the wedding, Adelia is found murdered. Sam is immediately the prime suspect, but he claims he has an ironclad alibi. He was with his twin sister Bailey. Only Bailey is nowhere to be found. So as I said, I read this on our flights back from our safari trip. So the setting and the safari aspects really resonated with me. I'm not sure I would have liked it quite so much if I hadn't just literally been doing some of the things. Obviously, there was no murder on our trip. Some of the things that were happening in this book, most of the characters are terribly unlikable. Something that happens, I think, too often in thrillers because it has to be that way to make the story work. But I did find it entertaining and I had fun reading it. The resolution was actually pretty engaging, if a bit unbelievable. There is definitely a very large sense of place in it, which I loved. So that is The Safari by Jaclyn Goldis, and it comes out in May.
I'm so glad you decided to read this while you were on safari because what a perfect pick.
It really was. It was fun because they were going out to look at game. We had just done that. There were just various aspects of it that were really interesting. I definitely think it falls in line with the kind of Riley Sager over-the-top endings, which kind of seem to be becoming more of a thing. And as long as you realize that, then it's an enjoyable read.
I will say that I gave this arc to my mom because I have a copy as well. And she read it and she really liked it. She was not on safari. She was in my home, which can feel like elephant stampede or, but she was not on a real safari, but she really enjoyed the book too. So I don't think you need to be on safari to appreciate it.
No, I think that's right. What about you? What have you read recently?
Well, I've noticed as I was putting my list together today that most of the reads that I've been drawn to are motherhood stories, which was a theme a couple years ago big in my reading, but I think she's back for 2025 because those are the books that I'm just really drawn to and that they're sticking with me right now. So my last read, it doesn't come out until June 10th, but it's really good. So I'm sorry to talk about this so early, but get some pre-orders and holds in. It's Finding Grace by Loretta Rothschild. This is such a unique story. I believe it's a debut, but I don't want to tell you why it's very unique because I think the less you know, the better. And I went back and looked at the publisher synopsis because I just went into this totally blind. And the publisher actually did a great job of not spoiling the situation because what changes happens very early on in the book. And I was worried that it was just going to say it right in the synopsis, but it doesn't. So I think you'll be okay reading the full synopsis. But here's what I'll tell you. The story follows Honor. She's a mother who seems to just have everything together. She adores her beautiful daughter, Chloe, and she's got this charming and handsome husband, Tom. Honor's longing for another baby threatens to eclipse all of it. And then a shocking event changes their lives forever. So the narrative is told, like I said, from a unique perspective that really drew me into this fascinating story. There's this moral dilemma and a love story involved that felt so tense to me. This would be a perfect selection for book clubs because it explores themes of love, grief, and the interconnected lives of two women. That's Finding Grace by Loretta Rothschild.
I keep hearing so much about this one, like it's going to be the book of the year and how good it is.
Ooh, okay, that's good to know. I picked it up only because Chris Whitaker had blurbed it. He blurbs a lot of books, so I think that could steer me wrong in the future, but I really liked it. I would classify it maybe as like women's fiction. It's not a love story, but certainly that's a part of it. And also, this is not a spoiler, but major trigger warnings for infertility.
So the other one I recently read that I really enjoyed was the Griffin Sisters' Greatest Hits by Jennifer, and I think she says Weiner. Isn't that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Jennifer Weiner, which comes out April of this year. Sisters Cassie and Zoe Grossberg were born just a year apart, but could not have been more different. Zoe, blessed with charm and beauty, yearned for fame from the moment she could sing into a hairbrush. Cassie was a musical prodigy who never felt at home in her own skin and preferred the safety of the shadows. On the brink of adulthood in the early 2000s, destiny intervened, catapulting the sisters into the spotlight as the pop sensation The Griffin Sisters, hitting all the touchstones of early aughts fame. SNL, MTV, Rolling Stone magazine along the way. But after a whirlwind year in the public eye, the band abruptly broke up. 2 decades later, Zoe's a housewife, Cassie's off the grid. The sisters aren't speaking, and the real reason for the Griffin sisters' breakup is still a mystery. Zoe's teenage daughter, Cherry, who's determined to be a star in spite of Zoe's warnings, is on a quest to learn the truth about what happened to the band all those years ago. As secrets emerge, all 3 women must face the consequences of their choices, the ones they made and the ones the music industry made for them. Can they forgive each other and themselves? And will they ever make music together again? So I haven't read one of her books in so many years, probably like 15 years. Like it's been a really long time. But I love music and I love stories about musical groups and bands. And she has a new publisher, William Morrow, who I work with regularly. And I generally really like their books. So I tried it and I really enjoyed it. One of the sisters, Zoe, is pretty unlikable, but for some reason that did not bother me in this one. I'm like, who am I with all of these unlikable characters? But that's okay. But I rooted for her sister, Cassie, and Zoe's daughter, Cherry, and I really liked the resolution of the book. I found it to be a strong read, and I loved all of the musical aspects. And that's the Griffin Sisters' Greatest Hits by Jennifer Weiner.
I'm so glad that a music book finally worked for you because I feel like there have been a few lately that have been exciting but just haven't really delivered.
I think that's right. I think after Daisy Jones, there was just a proliferation of them. And so it's just a matter of weeding through them. But this one was really good. And like I said, it touched on a lot of music, which was fun.
Yes, absolutely.
So what else have you been reading?
My other last read was Nesting by Roisin O'Donnell, and it came out February 18th. This was an instant bestseller in Ireland and the UK. And I picked it up because you loved it so much and included it in your winter reading guide and said, I think you're really going to like this one. And you felt excited about it. And I did. This is a story about a mother that packs up her children and leaves her husband with a split-second decision. This is such an interesting story about coercive control, emotional abuse, and the lengths that a mother will go to protect her family. I also thought it was really interesting because it touched on the housing crisis in Ireland and just this mom trying to do what's best for her children. This was also a timely read for me because I recently hosted Emma Gray for an interview at my local independent bookstore, Schuler, and Emma's most recent novel, Pictures of You, addresses coercive control and kind of this emotional manipulation. And Emma Gray's daughter was with her, and she is getting her PhD in gender studies in Australia. And she shared with us that coercive control or like emotional manipulation is actually illegal in Australia, and spouses can be prosecuted for this type of abuse. And I found that so fascinating.
That is fascinating. I just thought that book was so amazing.
It really was. It was different than what I thought it was going to be. I was thinking it was more of a thriller initially or a mystery based on the synopsis, but it's really just this propulsive story, but in a tense way that you just have to know the fate of this family. And it was just very thoughtful.
Yes, it was so well written, and I think that really helped. But also, she does touch on the housing crisis in Ireland and what it's like for a woman who really doesn't have any resources. Her family lives elsewhere, has 2 young children, and she's pregnant. Like, what is she going to do? Like, I just felt like she really put you in, I guess you say in Ciara's shoes.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just amazing to me. And the blurbs on that book, like, you read blurbs and they're generally pretty generic, but like they're very specific and glowing for that book.
Yes. And it comes out February 18th, but I haven't seen this anywhere on Bookstagram. So I think you found a little hidden gem here.
I know. And I've been trying to shout it from the rooftops, and I'm hoping people will pick it up.
I hope so too.
Good. Well, I'm so happy that you liked it.
Yes. Okay. What are you reading now?
Well, I'm currently reading a really cute little mystery called Savvy Summers and the Sweet Potato Crimes by Sandra, Jaclyn, Opoku, and it comes out not until July. When Savvy Summers first opened Essie's Soul Food Cafe, she never expected her customer favorite sweet potato pie to become the center of a murder investigation. But when Grandy Jaspers, the 75-year-old neighborhood womanizer, drops dead at table 2, she suddenly has more to worry about than just maintaining Essie's reputation for the finest soul food in the Chicago area. I am loving this. Savvy is an absolute hoot. She is just so entertaining, has all these great one-liners and quips. And I also love all the soul food references, like the food. As I'm reading it, it's making me hungry all the time because she's talking about soul food and Nouvelle soul food. And then also it's set in the South Side Chicago. And I went to college in Chicago, so I'm loving the setting, but all the way around, it's a really fun read, and it's the start of a series. And it's called Savvy Summers and the Sweet Potato Crimes by Sandra, Jaclyn, Opoku.
That sounds so fun and just a light, breezy one for summer.
And you mentioned motherhood trends, and something I was going to mention later, but I'll mention it now, is all of these light mysteries. That is such a trend for 2025. There are so many coming out.
Yes, I just saw that I got approved for one on NetGalley that's about maybe like the cheesecake mysteries, and it's a Golden Girls cozy mystery series. I'm like, well, this sounds fun. I could use some cheesecake and Golden Girls.
Okay, that sounds so cute. And I read Welcome to Murder Week, I think was the name of it, by Karen Ducasse, and it was so cute. I mean, there's just a lot of them. Kathleen West is writing one. Abby Waxman. There's just a lot of light mysteries coming out, and that's great. I think everybody could use that right now. And like you said, they're good for summer.
Yes, I think so too.
So what are you reading?
The book I just started this morning is Between the Devil and the Deep Blue Sea by Jessica Guerrieri. This comes out in May. I am really loving the family dynamics and the writing in this debut so far. I'm just about 10% in. This story follows Leah O'Connor, and she's a mother torn between the life that she's currently living and the allure of a phantom life that can no longer be hers. Swept off her feet by the gentle charm of Lucas O'Connor, Leah's unexpected pregnancy changes the course of her carefree lifestyle. Over a decade and 3 children later, Leah is unraveling. She resents the world in which her artistic aspirations have been sidelined by the overwhelming demands of motherhood. And Leah starts to rely more on glasses of wine, and they keep getting fuller and fuller and fuller whenever they're around her husband's family. And so Leah is really going to have to be introspective and learn how to ask for help and decide if the family she has rejected will be her salvation or ultimate undoing. The publisher describes this book as a masterful blend of book club and literary women's fiction, and also offers a frank rebuttal to wine mom culture. So the comps are Celeste Ng and Leanne Moriarty. Like, if you like those authors, you're going to like this book. And I'm excited to see if that holds up. And that's Between the Devil and the Deep Blue Sea by Jessica Guerrieri. It comes out in May.
So you are on a motherhood theme.
Yeah, just wait. It keeps going.
Well, so does my light mystery, because my next book is also one. So clearly we have themes going.
Yes.
So my other current read that I'm reading from NetGalley, so I'm reading it on my Kindle, is The World's Greatest Detective and Her Just Okay Assistant by Liza Tully. And this also comes out in July. Olivia Blunt is thrilled to be hired as assistant to the nationally renowned investigator Aubrey Merritt. She longs to become a valued contributor to the great detective's work. But Merritt is a difficult, exacting boss, and the learning curve is steeper than she expected. After weeks of boring computer work, Olivia is finally invited to join Merritt on an important case. On the night of her 65th birthday, Victoria Summersworth somehow fell over her balcony railing to her death on the rocky shore of Vermont's Lake Champlain. She was a happy woman, rich, beloved, in love, and matriarch of the preeminent Summersworth family. The police ruled her death a suicide, but Victoria's daughter Haley thinks it was murder. Merritt and Olivia soon discover that the Summersworth family is a complicated web of lies, ambitions, and resentments. As the suspect list grows, Olivia makes one apparent mistake after another. But when she blunders into a truly dangerous situation, she realizes Merritt might be right. She might be in over her head with this whole detective thing. So first, I have to say, the title on this one is so long. It's a Berkeley book, and they have had a number of titles like that coming out this year where I'm like, woo, that's a mouthful. So I don't know if that's going to be a new trend that we're seeing as well, but it's kind of funny. But this is a ton of fun so far. I'm really enjoying it. It kept me up later than I wanted to be last night. I actually had a sick dog, so I was up and down and up and down. And so I was reading this one when I couldn't go back to sleep. And it's very, very entertaining. And that is The World's Greatest Detective and Her Just Okay Assistant by Liza Tully.
I love that title. As soon as you said it, I'm like, oh, that's fun.
Oh, I love it too. It's just interesting because it's longer than most titles, but they have had several like that lately.
Mm-hmm. That is interesting.
Yeah. So what else are you reading?
Okay, another motherhood book is The Names by Florence Knapp, and this comes out May 6th. This is a buzzy debut novel that asks, can a name change the course of a life? In the wake of a catastrophic storm, Cora sets off with her 9-year-old daughter Maya to register her son's birth. Her husband Gordon is a local doctor, and he's really respected in the community. But at home, he has this terrifying and really controlling presence. And he is dead set on Cora naming their son after him, Gordon. But when the registrar asks what Cora would like to call the child, she hesitates. And so this book splits off into 3 sliding door scenarios where in one situation she names the boy Gordon, and in the other situations, she lets her daughter pick the name, and the other, she chooses the name that she would have chosen. So it explores how everyone's lives are shaped by her choice of this name. The names also explores the painful ripple effects of domestic abuse, the messy ties of family, and the possibilities of autonomy and healing. So the publisher describes this as an emotional gut punch, which is like my catnip. I love when something hits me like that. And it was also described as a modern classic. And that is also right up my alley. So I have high hopes for this one. I'm about halfway through and enjoying it so far. And it's The Names by Florence Knapp.
So that is up next for me. It's one of my 2 next ones because this book has been getting buzz since I was at FallCon in October. I already have a copy of it without the cover because that's how early it was. It was like a manuscript. And I was like, okay, this sounds good. And then several people raved about it. And then one person whose opinion I respect didn't really like it. So I was kind of on the fence. And then recently a friend of mine reached out to me who's not even in the book world. And her friend is friends with Florence. And so she sent me the book and she didn't send me the book. She sent me like a photo of the book. And she's like, have you heard about this one? And so I guess Florence is a well-known sewer. She specializes in English paper piercing, according to my friend, which I didn't even know what that was. But I followed her on Instagram so I could see what that was. And I thought, oh, this is so interesting. And her mother is or was an editor at a big publishing house in the UK. But I love sliding doors, so I'm going to try it. I'm thinking it may be too dark for me, but I'm going to try and see. I did okay with Penitence and really liked it, so I'm going to see how this goes. I'm always attracted to those unique premises.
I think if you did okay with Nesting, this is kind of reminiscent of that.
Okay.
Like, as far as it doesn't feel, like I said, I'm only about halfway through. It's not graphic or anything in that regard. So I think it's worth a try.
That's what I was thinking, because I love unique premises, as I said. Like anything that's just different is so much fun to read. So I thought, well, I'll try it. And a modern classic, I agree with you. That kind of draws you in, that description.
Definitely.
So that was my next book. So if you want to then talk about your next book, that'd be great.
Sure. Well, I'm heading on vacation to Florida. And after all of these heavy motherhood books, I'm really hoping just for some kind of bingey page turners. So we are driving, like I mentioned, with the boys. And so the first one that I'm going to start with is What Kind of Paradise by Janelle Brown. She is the author of Pretty Things and Watch Me Disappear. This story is about a teenage girl that breaks free from her father's world of isolation to discover that her whole life is a lie. So this girl is growing up in an isolated cabin in Montana in the mid-90s. I do love a mystery set in the 90s. And Jane really only knows about the reclusive world that she and her father live in. They're off the grid, and her father is really elusive about their past, and he doesn't give Jane any information beyond the facts that they once lived in the Bay Area and that her mother died in a car accident. As Jane becomes a teenager, she starts pushing against the boundaries of her life off the grid. But when Jane realizes that her devotion to her father has made her an accomplice to a horrific crime, she flees Montana to look for answers about her mysterious past. I'm really excited about this one. Janelle's books are always so immersive, not necessarily like a popcorn thriller at all, but just very layered and just draw you right into the story. So I'm hoping that this will be a fun car read for me. That was What Kind of Paradise by Janelle Brown, and it comes out June 10th.
Her outside publicist just sent this one to me, and it just came with nothing. And so I was like, I've never read Janelle Brown before. How did this book arrive? And then she emailed me and said, I just sent you 3 books, and this was one of them. And so I was kind of curious about it. The beginning of it sounds like These Silent Woods in terms of the father and the daughter off the grid, but obviously it sounds like it goes in a different direction.
Yeah, that was my initial thought too. I'm like, oh, this kind of sounds like These Silent Woods.
Yeah, exactly. So the other one that I'm going to start next that I can't wait to read, and I know you've already read it and loved it, is I See You've Called In Dead by John Kenney. Bud Stanley is an obituary writer who is afraid to live. His wife recently left him for a far more interesting man. He goes on a particularly awful blind date with a woman who brings her ex, and he has too many glasses of scotch one night and proceeds to pen and publish his own obituary. The newspaper wants to fire him, but now the company's system has him listed as dead, and the company can't fire a dead person. The ensuing fallout forces him to realize that life may be actually worth living. I know you love this one, as I mentioned, and last night at book club, Sherry was saying that Mary and Pamela both told her how much they loved it, and they're going to duke it out for who gets to talk about it on my show, which is something that ends up happening with like half the books they love. I'm really excited to try it. I did read the first few pages ages ago, and then I got pulled off onto something else, but I'm going to pick it back up again, and I'm really excited to read it. And that's I See You've Called In Dead by John Kenney, which comes out in April.
I thought this was just such an unexpected, heartwarming story. And if you like the found family trope, I think this is going to be a good one for you.
Oh, you know I do, so that's great.
Yes.
Good. Well, what else is up next for you?
This very much sounds like a popcorn thriller, which I'm excited about for vacation. It's The Compound by Aisling Rawle, and it comes out June 24th. This is described as Love Island meets Lord of the Flies, and it sounds reminiscent of a bingeable reality TV series. So Lily is a bored, beautiful 20-something. She wakes up on a remote desert compound alongside 19 other contestants competing on a massively popular reality TV show. And to win, she's got to outlast her housemates to stay in the compound the longest while competing in these challenges for luxury rewards, plus communal necessities to outfit their new home, like food, appliances, and a front door. Cameras are catching all her angles, good and bad, but Lily has no desire to leave. Why would she when the world outside is falling apart? As the competition intensifies, intimacy between the players deepens, and it becomes increasingly difficult to distinguish between desire and desperation. When the unseen producers raise the stakes, forcing contestants into upsetting, even dangerous situations, the line between playing the game and surviving it begins to blur. If Lily makes it to the end, she'll receive prizes beyond her wildest dreams, but what will she have to do to win? Some of the reviews for this book said that there is a smart social commentary that goes along with that, and I think that's key when I'm picking up a popcorn thriller. I want there to be some sort of like message or some sort of satire or social commentary, so I think this will be a win for me for vacation. It's The Compound by Aisling Rawle.
Okay, I'm so curious. I haven't heard a single thing about that one.
I don't remember where I saw that, but the cover just grabbed me and I'm like, yes, vacation.
Good. I can't wait to hear back.
You know what's smart? Enjoying a fresh gourmet meal at home that you didn't have to cook. Meet Factor, your loophole in the laws of mealtime. Chef-crafted meals delivered with a tap, ready in just 2 minutes. You know what's even smarter? Treating yourself without cheating your goals. Factor is dietitian approved, chef prepared, and you plated. Pretty smart, huh? Refresh your routine and eat smart with Factor. Learn more at factormeals.com.
Every cup of Nespresso coffee is an invitation to transform your morning routine into a ritual you can treasure each and every day. Using the Virtuo Pop, a simple touch of the button freshly brews bold aromas and a rich, velvety crema layer for delicious cafe-quality coffee at home. Whether you enjoy your coffee hot or over ice, every sip, every morning is unforgettable. Nothing tastes like Nespresso coffee. Visit Nespresso.com or our app to explore our full range of easy-to-use machines and coffees not found anywhere else.
What books have you DNF'd lately?
You know, I haven't really DNF'd anything because I feel like I keep dipping in and out of stuff, but I couldn't really say that I'm done with any of them. But I had one book that I didn't love, and so I was going to talk a little bit about that. It's called The Book of Lost Hours by Hailey Gelfuso, and it's a debut that comes out in August. It's being billed as one for fans of The Ministry of Time, which I DNF'd, and The Midnight Library, which I loved. So I didn't hate The Book of Lost Hours, but I didn't end up loving it either. It's a creative premise, and it's this place where all these memories are stored. It's very complicated. And so all these thoughts and memories are stored, and people can go in and access them. But I found the pacing to be really up and down. And I liked the reveals, but I thought, gosh, it took a while to get here. And then I didn't really like the last quarter or so. It's interesting to read the reviews because a lot of people are loving it and giving it 5 stars, like this is the greatest book. And then there are a fair number of people who are referencing the same issues I had. There are holes in the story, the pacing is erratic, and then the main character makes some really bad decisions at the end that kind of hiccuped the story for me. I couldn't get past them. I was like, maybe this could have gone in a different direction. So I gave it 3 stars. It's not awful. It's not great. But overall, it was disappointing because it had such promise. And that is The Book of Lost Hours by Hailey Gelfuso.
I feel like that book really lived up to its name for you because
I hadn't even thought of that.
You lost
Yes, because you know, and I wasn't even going to say it because I say it all the time, but it also makes me so mad when I get into a book like that. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's a big book. I spent a long time reading it. And then I get to the end and I'm like, oh, if you just made a couple different choices, I could have given it a 4-star and been like, wow, there are a few little holes, but it's an interesting premise. But yeah, how about you?
I actually have no recent DNFs. So that's a good thing. But also, I feel like I haven't been reading a ton either. So the books that I'm picking up are ones that I'm pretty sure are going to work for me. I'm not being too adventurous with my reads right now. So I think that's why.
Yes, I'm sure as we head into March and April, that will really change for both of us. But I agree. I was kind of the same way. I just haven't been at a place where I'm like, okay, I really am not going to finish this book. And so I can list it as a DNF.
Yeah, I think because we have been waiting a long time to pick up books in this time frame. As we were working on our winter guide, we're like, we're ready for summer books. And so now we've kind of had our eye on a few that we wanted to start off with. And so I think that might be contributing to the lack of DNFs as well.
I think that's right. Well, have you had any good book mail highlights?
Yes, I have 2 books that recently came that are authors that I've really enjoyed their debuts. And so I'm excited to read their sophomore novels. So the first one is Home of the American Circus by Allison Larkin. She's the author of The People We Keep. The story is about 30-year-old Freya Arnolds, and she has an emergency. She's short on her rent, and so she leaves her lackluster life as a bartender in Maine and goes back to her suburban hometown in New York, and she is going to live in the house that she inherited from her estranged parents. Despite her attempts to lay low, Freya comes across her childhood friends and these familial enemies and old flames, as well as her 15-year-old niece Aubrey, who is secretly living in the derelict home. As they reconnect, Freya and Aubrey lean on each other, working to restore the house and come to terms with the devastating events that pulled them apart years ago. And it's set in the birthplace of the American Circus, which I believe is where the title is drawn from. And the publisher says that this is an exploration of broken families, the weight of the past, and the complicated journey of finding home. What makes me most excited about this book is The People We Keep came out in 2021. And so I love that Allison Larkin was able to really take her time with her second novel. I feel like sometimes, depending on if the publisher buys it's a 2-book deal, they've got to get their second book out right away. And so I like that she was able to take her time, and that makes me feel really hopeful for this story. That is Home of the American Circus by Allison Larkin, and it comes out May 6th.
When you mentioned her, I was thinking, gosh, it was a long time ago that her other book came out, but you're right. That is a good sign.
Yeah, I hope so. What about you?
I'm so excited for this first one that just recently arrived to me. It's called The Harvey Girls by Juliette Fay, and it comes out in August. And it's historical fiction. 1926, Charlotte Crowninshield was born into one of the finest Boston society families. Now she's on the run from a brutal husband, desperate to disappear into the wilds of the Southwest. Billie McTavish is the oldest of 9 children born to Scottish immigrants in Nebraska. She quit school in the 6th grade to help with her mother's washing and mending business, but isn't even able to help keep the family afloat. Desperate, both women join the ranks of the Harvey Girls, waitresses who serve in America's first hospitality chain on the Santa Fe Railroad. Hired on the same day, they share 3 to a room, a heartfelt dislike of each other, and each has a secret that will certainly get them fired. So I am really excited for this one. My mother was always totally intrigued with the Harvey Girls, and so I know a little bit about them, but I loved Juliette's book, The City of Flickering Lights, and so I'm really excited for this one and to learn more about the empire that Fred Harvey built. And I think some of the story takes place in Yellowstone, and I'm a huge national park person, so I'm hoping this will be really a fun read. There's less historical fiction coming out, and I am really just kind of over World War II right now. So I'm saying no to all of those. So there aren't a lot of options. So I'm excited to see this one. And it's The Harvey Girls by Juliette Fay.
This sounds perfect for you.
It really does. I'm excited for it. What else has come for you?
Okay, this is my last motherhood story of the day. It's The Girls Who Grew Big by Leila Mottley, and it comes out June 24th. Leila is the author of Nightcrawling, which she wrote when she was 17. And she was the poet laureate, I believe, of the city of Oakland. And she's really a poet at heart, and her writing was so lyrical in Nightcrawling. So I am very excited to see how this book goes. I'm ready to savor this one. This story is about the joys and entanglements of a fierce group of teenage mothers in a small town on the Florida Panhandle. The town thinks the girls have lost their way, but really they are finding it. Looking for love, making and breaking friendships, and navigating the miracle of motherhood and the paradox of girlhood. That is The Girls Who Grew Big by Leila Mottley, and it comes out June 24th.
And her last book came out a couple of years ago, is that right?
Yes, it was 2022. So again, taking some time with the sophomore novel, and I like that for these ladies.
I agree. So my other is nonfiction. It's Story of a Murder, The Wives, the Mistresses, and Dr. Crippen by Hallie Rubenhold, and it comes out in late March. On February 1st, 1910, the vivacious, diamond-adorned music hall performer Belle Elmore suddenly vanished from her home, causing alarm among her friends, the entertainers of the Music Hall Ladies Guild. Their demands for an investigation would lead to an unearthing of a gruesome secret and trigger a fevered international manhunt for Belle's husband, medical fraudster Dr. Holly Harvey Crippen. Ethel Leneuve, Crippen's typist and lover, who fled with Crippen in disguise, has always hidden in the shadows of this tale. Was she really just an innocent young girl enthralled to a powerful older man? Or was there an equally sinister story behind the death of Crippen's first wife, Charlotte? Brimming with twists and featuring a carnival cast of eccentric entertainers, star lawyers, zealous detectives, medics, and liars, Story of a Murder offers an electrifying snapshot of Britain and America at the dawn of the modern era. I am not often a true crime reader, but I make the exception for these stories set in the early 1900s because I'm just fascinated by that time period, but also anything set in the entertainment industry, like the vaudeville connection and music halls and all that. For some reason, that all just fascinates me. This is a really big book, but I'm excited to read it. And it's Story of a Murder, The Wives, the Mistresses, and Dr. Crippen by Hallie Rubenhold.
I do think that there should be like a distinction in genre between these historical true crime and current true crime, because it seems like the historical true crime is just in a different category in my mind. It's not as gratuitous or trying to make entertainment out of people's tragedies because it did happen so long ago. I'm not sure if you feel that way too.
I totally do. And in fact, I was thinking about that as I was looking at this one and getting ready to list it, that it is true crime, but it's cold cases. And I'm sure anybody affiliated with this is long gone since it happened in 1910. And I agree, it's not nearly as lurid and invasive. It's a different type of thing, like looking back on a crime and seeing if it potentially could be solved now. So I do agree with that.
Right. Well, I'll be curious to see what you think of that one.
Yeah, I'm really interested. So any book news?
Yes. Ivana and I have some exciting news. We co-host Chapters and Chats together, and a couple months ago, we hosted Dan Slepian, the author of the Sing Sing Files, which is a story of wrongful convictions in a New York prison. And after we had that Chapters and Chats discussion, we had a few exonerees, Dan calls them, men that he had worked with who were wrongfully imprisoned and are now on the outside. They joined our chat, and we had such a moving discussion. There were readers that joined us who are defense attorneys, and I just think generally people felt really moved by that conversation. And so after that, Dan reached out to Ivana and myself and said, hey, I would love to be a part of more book clubs like Chapters and Chats. Can you help me get this going? And so Ivana and I are working with Dan on this initiative to get the Sing Sing Files specifically into book clubs that Dan and an exoneree will join. So if you're interested in hosting a book club and having Dan and a wrongfully convicted man who is now on the outside join your book club, please let me know. We would love to connect you.
I just love that. I think that is the most exciting news, and what a difference you guys are going to make.
I hope so. Dan is the most passionate person I've ever come across. He is so invested in these men and working for justice, and he is just so inspiring to work with and to talk with. And so he just is kind of buoying us along, and we're happy to be a part of it. We plan to start small with just our close circles and readers that we are connected with, but eventually plan to reach out to independent bookstores and our libraries and law schools and things like that. So lots of fun things to come in regards to that book.
I was just going to suggest independent bookstores because so many of them have really booming book clubs and multiple book clubs and discounts they provide. You know, there's just so many different ways that they could help you do that.
Exactly. We're excited to get creative with that and are just working on putting like a book club kit together with next steps and resources. So if you're interested in hosting Dan, he truly would be overjoyed to join your book club, even if it's not your regular book club. But if you have coworkers or anybody that would just be interested in just reading this book together, if you liked Just Mercy or The Sun Does Shine, this is going to be a big win for you as well. You can email me at kellyhook.readsbooks@gmail.com.
That's so awesome.
Yes, so excited.
Well, my news isn't nearly as exciting. And it's not even really news. It's more something that I noticed recently, and you talked about nesting. And then I also just recently interviewed Callan Wink of Beartooth, which I loved. And both of those books started as short stories. And I thought that was really interesting. Roisin actually wrote an article for LitHub about it and how she'd written this short story and then developed it very differently into nesting. And then Callan talked about the same thing. That's where his story started. And I thought, you don't often see that. And so I was just curious if that was something you had encountered or if this is going to be a new trend. I thought it was interesting.
Okay, that is interesting because I feel like the few books that I've read that I knew started as short stories, I could tell that it started as short stories. But with nesting, I could not. That read seamlessly as a novel. What is the book that I'm trying to think of that was short stories? Give me a minute here. It's something about Salt, The Women of Salt.
I know Faculty Lounge by Jennifer Matthews started as short stories. And in the end, they kind of wanted her to develop it into a novel. but it was all the stories were already there. She just sort of created a little bit more of a link, but still, as you read, each chapter is told as a different perspective. So it kind of seems like part short stories, part, a novel. But I didn't think that at all. Like, this is really one short story that gets turned into. But she said like it was Ciara's story and it went in a totally different direction. And so then she kind of sat down and wrote the book with the same characters, but vastly different. And Callan said the same thing. Like, he wrote this short story ages ago. He turned it into what he called a very boring novel. Then he rejected that. Then he went back, talked with his agent, kind of started over again and wrote Beartooth. So I'm not really sure, like, if you read the original short story, other than maybe the characters, you would be able to see that they had changed. But I thought it was interesting because I'm just not sure I'd really heard anybody say that. And then 2 books in the same month, I was like, wow.
That is interesting. Okay, I just looked up the title of the one I was thinking of. It's Of Women and Salt by Gabriela Garcia. It came out in 2021, and the cover is beautiful. It's got the sea and then this coral color with that flower on the front.
Yeah, the flower.
Yeah, I think it might have been a pick of some, a big book club pick like Jenna or something. But yeah, that was one where I was like, I feel like this is short stories. And then after I read the author's note, and it was, and I'm like, okay, I feel like we're still there,
Yes,
but,
right, exactly. Like multiple, yeah. And that's kind of how the Faculty Lounge was, but I loved it. But I mean, it was definitely like interconnected stories. But this is like one short story turned into the novel and, vastly different. But I thought, oh, that's so interesting. So
that is, yeah, maybe a trend to be on the lookout for in 2025.
Yeah. And then the other thing is that Sherry Pusey of At What Sherry Reads has started a book club here in Richmond. We just met for the first time last night, and we read Here One Moment by Leanne Moriarty. And this is another that I loved the premise and actually loved most of the book. But I got to the end and I just kind of felt like the ending and like the woman's rationale. She walks down the plane telling people how they're going to die. And so the rationale for kind of how that came about didn't land great for me when I read it. So I think I ended up giving it like 3.5 stars. Like, I still liked the book, but I didn't love it. But then we had this wonderful discussion last night, and people were talking about, like, some people it landed for, some people it didn't, but like why it landed well for them. And I'm like, I hadn't really thought about that. So now I'm trying to decide if I need to go back and reread the book and see if I just kind of missed little clues along the way or what, because I'm kind of curious. That's never happened to me before. Usually, I'll feel pretty comfortable in how I feel about a book, but listening to everybody talk last night, I was like, And my boss at the Buzz magazines loves this book. She's not a big reader, but she'll read occasionally. And she has like been telling me, I don't know why you didn't like the ending. Like, we talked so much about it. And she has been saying, I've been telling everybody to read it. And so now I'm like, well, maybe I need to reread it. Maybe I just wasn't paying enough attention. Maybe I wasn't in the right place. I don't know. Has that happened to you?
Not that I mean, I know that my thinking has been stretched after a book club discussion, but I do think that's the beauty of talking about books and having book club discussions, because people just bring so many different perspectives, and it can really change your perception of an entire book. So I love that it made for such rich conversation.
I agree. It was a great book club selection. We talked a long time. It was so much fun, great group. But I thought, I wonder if I need to go back and reread it. I read it a long time ago too, and I didn't think to like refresh before we went. But I just remember thinking, I don't know about that explanation for what happened. But then as we were talking through it last night, I was like, well, maybe I didn't think through some of those aspects of it.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, that is so fun. And I adore Sherry. I feel like I've met her before in person because we've talked online for years. And I haven't, but hopefully someday I can make it out to both of you.
We talked about that last night, about how she has not met you, but I have. And I said, we need to get Kelly out here. And she says, we definitely do.
Yes.
For sure. Well, this was so much fun as always. And I hope you have a fabulous time in Florida.
Thank you, Cindy. So nice chatting with you.
This episode is brought to you by Abercrombie. Build your fits of the day with Abercrombie's newest denim drop. Here's where to start. Abercrombie's 90s straight jean goes with any shirt from tees to sweater polos. Super versatile. Their loose and baggy jeans are more trend forward, so you can grab those and go out with your friends. Abercrombie's denim fits come in a range of washes. Build your looks around Abercrombie denim. Shop online or in store.
I think you're on mute.
Workday starting to sound the same?
I think you're on mute.
Find something that sounds better for your career on LinkedIn. With LinkedIn Job Collections, you can browse curated collections by relevant industries and benefits, like flex PTO or hybrid workplaces, so you can find the right job for you. Get started at linkedin.com/jobs. Finding where you fit. LinkedIn knows how.
Thank you so much for listening to my podcast. I would love to connect with you on Instagram or Facebook, where you can find me at Thoughts from a Page. If you enjoy the show and have a moment to rate it or subscribe to it wherever you listen to your podcasts, I would really appreciate it. It makes a huge difference. And please tell all of your friends about Thoughts from a Page. Word of mouth does wonders to help the show grow. I hope you'll tune in next time.
Hi there, I'm Heather Drago.
And I'm Sarah Saunders.
We host the podcast, That's a Hard No, about saying no and setting boundaries.
So you can become that true and empowered you that this world needs. Saying no isn't just okay.
It's the key to living an authentic, fulfilling life.
I'm a licensed professional clinical counselor. So while this podcast is in no way a replacement for one-on-one therapy, I suppose I know what I'm talking about.
I'd say so. We talk about learning to say no and set healthy boundaries and how it impacts mental health, physical health, relationships, parenthood, and more.
Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and visit our website, hardnopodcast.com.
We're here to help you find your no and say it unapologetically.
That's a hard no.
Hi, I'm Emma.
And I'm Joe.
And we're the Professional Book Nerds. 2 Mondays a month, we interview authors and talk about their upcoming books, what drives them, and their go-to order at the cafe.
On Thursdays, we share recommendations and dive into topics readers face, like how do I actually read the books on my to-be-read list?
You can find the Professional Book Nerds podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Want to learn more about us? Our website is professionalbooknerds.com, and you can find us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at ProBookNerds.
We hope you'll come and listen, and as always,
happy reading.